Yep, there we go. I wonder why all my settings reset. No matter. Hey. Come here. Sit. Better behave, buddy. How's everybody doing? Igor is joining me. I'm going to close the door so Kate doesn't hear. No water? Look, it's you. It's you. You recently discovered the computer screen. It's really funny. Yeah, good boy. Good boy. Good boy, Igor. Good boy. Alright, can you sit over here? Sit. No. Just sit down. Just sit. It's okay. Boy. Let me close the door a little bit. Hopefully it doesn't climb on the thing. Alright. Got a little bit of a late stream today, so we'll see if anybody and how many people show up. I don't usually stream this late. So let's wait for a couple people to come in. What is it, babe? No. Sit down. Sit. So first thing I'm going to do, after I get Igor to calm down a little bit, is we're going to do some openings, unboxings, and then we'll get into some of our main event discussions here. So I've got a couple packages. I should probably be obfuscating my address information in here. So maybe we'll open it. Basically, I got a couple things that are going to be very interesting for everybody to see. I should have brought some scissors in there. How's everybody doing? How's everybody doing? There we go. I had to find it somewhere. Okay. That's it for that. Let's see what we got here. I have a Time Spiral Remastered Dovin's Veto. Can we get that? Or is that like the glare too much? What is that, baby? And looks like a Time Spiral Remastered shipment. So I got a Dismember and Dovin's Veto. I think these are the last two that I've needed for my main cube. So that's kind of sweet. Alright. And now, see if I can make the lighting a little bit better here. This is going to be a good one. Hold on. Alright. Yeah, just sit. No. Here, I'm going to put you over here again. Nope. Sit. Be a good boy. We have a package. I usually like to save these for like the end of the stream, but I'm a little too excited to see this one. All right, it's a plain box. What do you think about that? Probably just use this, honestly, to get it open. Move this down a little bit. Here we are. Not what I was hoping for, number-wise, but here she is. My serialized retro Mishra's Bauble. Didn't know what number I was going to get, so it looks like we got number 370. Pretty good condition. No. Here. Nope. Come on. Come on. Alright. Alright, I can focus a little bit better without him. So, I'm going to take a photo of these. And then we're going to get going on the discussion. Pretty sweet, if I do say so myself. Post this on Twitter. Boom. Everybody loves a good mail day photo. Wow. So we can talk about the bauble, I guess, a little bit. I mean, it doesn't have the same foiling as an old border foil. Has more of a rainbow foil, which I think they said it would. So it looks like a streak of rainbow is kind of going through it. Well, those are going right into the old cube ski. All right. I guess now we can resume. So, hope everybody enjoyed that, both current and later on YouTube. My name is Derek. You're watching my weekly Magic the Gathering Cube stream. And I've got a couple things on the docket today that I think will be kind of interesting. First one is I wanted to just kind of go over some of our 2022 Cube cards. Sorry, that was like really weird. Somebody just kind of like went aggro outside. There we go. Get the lighting right in here. I've never really done like too much light testing here, so maybe this is a little bit better. I just don't have the glowing background that so many people do. I want to go over the tweet that I posted a couple days ago. And I just kind of want to expand on it just a little bit. Where is it? Because I'm in the process of writing an article. First one I haven't written in a long time, and this is something that's going to influence the article. It's not going to be like a article about the top cards in 2022 for Cube. It's because like just people love a good list, but this isn't really like the framework I'll be using for this, and I'm still working out the specifics of it. Igor's like crying outside the room. I don't know if you can hear it. I'm still working out like the specifics of what I'll be talking about or how my framework is. So I'm hoping to use this conversation today to go over it a little bit with y'all, to see what anybody who's listening would think or how I'm interpreting some of the answers that I received. So I thought that'd be kind of cool to expand upon. Okay, so the question, let me pull this up here. Question is, can I zoom in on this? I think I can. If you could hoist up some card designs to define 2022 for Cube, what would you pick and why? Pretty simple question. First, I think things people would think of is like, what are the cards that were most powerful? What were the cards that were most iconic? Which can be kind of the same thing. But and like that's great. Like that's something that I'm looking for as part of the conversation. What I want to expand upon a little bit and see how some of these answers fit into this other idea of how we would hoist up cards or card designs is let's look at cards that are representative of some mechanical design choices that have been made broadly in 2022, and what card would best represent them? What is the most exemplary execution of that idea? And hold on, I gotta open the door. I gotta get Igor back in here. You, my friend, are being a little troublemaker today. Come here. Come here. Come here. Look at this. This is what I've been dealing with for days. Days. He's just inserting himself into my computer time. Every time. Igor, the animal on the screen is actually you. Okay? It's like a mirror. But it's moving on a delay, so you probably can't tell. I know. It's very fascinating. Okay. So, one of the things I'm trying to do with this article is work out a framework for evaluating cards that are illustrative of mechanical choices or just overall design choices that have been made given all the formats that, or all the printings this year, be it Premier Set, Commander, Supplementary. What are they working with? How is it being executed? And what cards come out of these that has come out this year that like showcase where we are and are aspirational or inspirational cards for all of us as a cube community of designers in 2022. How can we look at what WotC is printing and work those choices, those executions into our cubes? And what does that do to our design process? Is it functionally better or worse than if we just hoisted up the cards that slot most easily into our existing cubes? It's the most common way of looking at it. You know, I have green-white tokens. I need more green-white token cards. And there's nothing wrong with this. In fact, it's beneficial for many people that have existing archetypes to look into that. What I'm proposing is that we could look at cards and that are really strong indicators of, they're really suggestive as to their potential in both maximizing the card itself, but also what could change about your cube. How, by leaning into what a card asks of you or what it does to a game, or to any game, or how it works mechanically. What happens when we lean further into a single card design, and what ripple effects does it have in my cube, in all my cubes? I'm going to go through some of the examples here and talk about them a little bit. Again, as I go, I'm just going to restate this again because it's important to stress. There is no wrong answer here. I'm not looking for somebody to give me a particular answer or a particular view that's going to align with mine. I'm looking for everybody's answers, and then I'm going to propose a way of evaluating cards in order to open up design space or change design space within your cube. How does a card influence your cube holistically, and not just how does the cube slot in, how does the card slot into my cube or cube's already existing structure? Now, it's a subtle thing maybe, but it's a really juicy, interesting, and important thing to me. And there's a card I'm going to show you that I've talked about a tiny bit, but I want to go over it a little bit more. And I'm going to be writing about it too, so you'll hear about it in my article. So let's scroll down to some of these answers. Sorry about this being a little bit long-winded. So Austin, Desert Cube, of Desert Cube fame, says touch the spirit realm. It's flexible, and as it can function as removal or a combat trick or a protection spell. Yes, this is true. It can be a banishing light. It can, remove a creature from combat, or it can protect your creature from a removal spell. So it functionally can work, can be executed all those ways in a game of Magic. It features the return of a great underutilized mechanic, and I don't know what exactly that refers to. Probably Blink. And the set it comes from was a fantastic draw from mine. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but that's not really what we're after here, is it? Although I do appreciate the sentiment, I also really loved. Oops, I also really loved it too. Okay, so Touch the Spirit Realm is actually an example that I think is pretty good for what the framework I'm trying to develop. What we have here is a commonly printed um, piece of white interaction, which is a Banishing Light Oblivion Ring, style effect, but it has the implementation of the mechanic Channel. And Channel is elegantly designed, in that it's one of my favorite mechanics, in that it's not like cycling where you're paying mana, discarding it, and drawing a new card, which it's very powerful to put cycling on a card, because you can replace any card in your hand with another card from the top of your library, and when cards are no longer relevant in a given board state, it can be great to see something new, especially when you're behind. Channel, Channel allows you to discard a card, discard the card and pay a cost in order for it to do something. So instead of a random card from your deck, you get an effect, a particular effect. Obviously, Channel is an older mechanic, so it's shown up in the past. So what I like specifically about this is we got to revisit it, and we got to the design space that was available to us at Channel grew significantly with cards like Touch the Spirit Realm, because we're now able to take a sort of very commonplace removal spell that's shown up time and time again and give it additional functionality. One, by having an alternative mode to the card, but also by putting the card in your graveyard. So it functions it plays as written, essentially, in that it exiles a creature or artifact. Obviously, there's a little bit of balance going on with the card, because you can't exile any non-land permanent. You have to exile a specific from two specific card types. So that's fine. The trade-off is really there for me on this one. So you get a baseline effect that we're very familiar with. So there's some comfort in what Touch of the Spirit Realm is doing as a card. But you're also getting this alternative mode, which is kind of what modal cards are. My voice is very quiet. Okay, I'll turn it up. There's also a dog in the way of my mic, so I'm going to turn it up a little bit. How's that? Is that better? David, can you hear me? Okay, cool. So, Igor, here, come here. Sit. Good. So, no. Igor found out what my computer is doing lately, so he's been glued to it. No. So I have to teach him a little bit, give him some boundaries. I do indulge him, but right now I have to give him a little bit of boundary. Okay, so to conclude, Touch of the Spirit Realm, it's familiar, it's comforting in what it does on the surface, but Channel, the new execution of Channel, gives us a spell-like effect and a discard and a card, a unusual card type in the graveyard. So if we're going to eat the whole bird with this card, you have removal for white. You have blink. You have a combat trick in that you can exile creatures to get them out of the way. You can exile artifacts. Like you could blink artifacts in the same way, which is huge. You have discarding, and you have putting enchantments in the graveyard. All of these things are knobs that you can turn in your cube to, and these things can be more or less relevant depending on how hard you want to lean into them. And so all of that, using the whole bird, using the whole buffalo, however you want to define the thing, is something that I'm going to be stressing a lot in this framework of card evaluation. Now, is this... So, as a card, yes, I think it's a good example because it's doing things in 2022 to a... What is it, babe? What do you see there? Do you see something on the screen? That's me. Come here. Be a good boy. Be a good boy. Be a good boy. Come here. Here we go again. He doesn't understand that it's me and him. No. No. Don't get up on there. I guess, is this... So, you're going to hear me talk about using the whole buffalo on this, and I'll get a little more into that as I continue talking this shit out. Because it's part of the bigger picture for me. Like, leaning into the individual parts of the card, how they function, where the card moves around the game, and what we're keeping as relevant when we're trying to like maximize a card's effect. What does that even mean? It means understanding all the pieces of the card and how they work together, or how they can work separately and what we can lean into when building an archetype or a deck into our cube to make this card better. So I guess my next point, my bigger point is like, should this card be hoisted up as like something mechanically interesting or a great or interesting design? Interesting is such a dry word. Is this something that we can look to as saying, 2022 was the year we got to look at Touch of the Spirit Realm for Cube. Look at and what we could do with Touch of the Spirit Realm was really interesting, and we got to push things forward a little bit. Maybe a touch. You know? It is. Calibretto, hello. Welcome to the stream. So something doesn't have to be... So something like this doesn't have to be like the best version of the thing, but it will be in some instances. Spoilers for, as David White is in the chat, Fable of the Mirror Breaker is definitely here. Oh, hey, Brando. Yeah, thanks for popping in, man. We're kind of doing this, I'm establishing kind of a framework for thinking about cube cards. I'm talking about these 2022 cards. The kind of like getting into the reason why I asked this the other day on Twitter. So this card hits a lot of different cubes. And is it the best example of like new channel, or like the new implementation of channel? Like, does moving enchantments into the graveyard and discarding cards matter? Does blinking stuff matter? Does white removal permanent based matter? All of the like blinking artifacts and creatures matter. These things all kind of don't have to be unified, but you can lean into all the individual parts of this when like evaluating other cards around it. And like it's okay, it might be kind of silly to think about like, why would I want to like lean into a removal spell or a combat trick or something like a blink spell like this? Like what's the goal? Oh, I know, baby, I know. Like, is the end game really worth it if we're just like leaning into a single card that's just like a piece of interaction? Well, I think like mapping archetypes and decks into a cube, any cube environment, you know, you can have these points of interest where you look at a card like Touch of the Spirit Realm and see all the parts of it. Like, you know what, this has got a lot going on here. And what happens when we lean further into all the different functionality of this card? So anyway, I'm gonna recycle a lot of these thoughts and apply them to the different cards. So let's keep going and just see where this conversation goes. But I really like this example, and you know, I'll zoom out a little bit. I think at the end, because this is still something that I'm working on. Leyline binding. So Zach Dubin says, I think leyline binding has to be at the top of the list. The OG domain keyword nostalgia. So we have the returning of another old mechanic. Rewards strong mana based drafting in a 5-color shell. Okay, I can see where they're coming from here. Often when playing 5-color decks, double spelling is difficult, and this is a real boon to mitigating those issues and doesn't occupy a gold card slot. So there's some really good points here that I think are worth getting into. So leyline binding is, I think, do we need to pull it up? I don't know. I don't think so, but I'm going to pull it up anyway, just because. Okay, so just in case you're living under a rock, leyline binding is super powerful, so I'm not really sure why I need to go over this, but I will. 6 mana, flash, cost reduction based on the number of mana, like basic land types that you control, and exiles a non-land permanent as long, you know, until it leaves the battlefield. So the cost variable on this is like one of the biggest things. It's also a instant speed Oblivion Ring. The card is incredibly powerful. I mean, it's played in Eternal formats like Modern and Legacy already, due in large part to how easy it is to get domain. So I'm like, so domain, this is a great opportunity to talk about that. So when I'm looking at, like, as I said before, I don't know if both of you were in the chat already, but evaluating cards in this process is going to be, you know, what cards are really like emblematic of 2022 in not just in a power level way, but in like how we're what am I trying to say? Like when we look at the different design choices that WotC's made over 2022, revisiting domain, revisiting channel. Okay, these old mechanics coming back and being reworked and supported by new different printings, like the common lands, the ETB tap dual lands, and with land types, for instance. So like domain, land types matter, bolstering up 5-color, like these are things that are huge mechanical explorations by Wizards of the Coast in 2022, and it's a really big part of what's going on with the design of the game right now. That's why we see in Eternal formats, constructed formats, you see 4 and 5 color decks appear with regularity. And, you know, yes, there are other designs that are attributing to that, namely the triomes, right? But, come here. Sit down. Be a good boy. Good boy. Good boy. So, exploring domain is a big big design decision that was made, and how does it get implemented in these card designs, and like, what are some great examples that we can lean into that are like, ooh, this is a power level that I like. This is the kind of card that I like to play. So if I want to play this card in my cube, like if I want to play Leyline Binding in my cube, I want to make sure that it's a good card. So what do I have to do to make Leyline Binding a good card? Well, I have to make it cost 1 mana. And how do I make it cost 1 mana? Well, I need land types on my dual lands, on my mana fixing. I need that, and the sort of like, when you spiral out of like the needs of an individual card, you start to make choices based on these needs of the cards that you want to play. And you can start to see how you start evaluating cards differently based on the desire to play with different cards. And also what it can change about your cube. And like, Leyline Binding is a really great example, because this card, wanting to play a kind of card like this for whatever reason, because you think white needs better removal, because you like the idea of playing gold cards that are not gold, because you like the idea of domain spells in your cube, it has a ripple-like effect on everything, and you could end up changing cards in your cube or changing the way your cube is constructed to maximize the power level of cards like this. And I think one of the practices that was done with 4-packs of Magic was, how do I maximize almost, if not every card in the cube? I know I didn't do it with every card in the cube, but like the principle of, if I'm playing X, what do I need to make X good, was always there. What do I need to maximize the power level of this? How do I lean? What does it mean when I have to play, you know, when you're in to play Dragon's Rage Channeler and you want to make Dragon's Rage Channeler a powerful card in your cube, playing things like Mishra's Bauble and Urza's Bauble become a natural extension of supporting Dragon's Rage Channeler. And if we're supporting Dragon's Rage Channeler, then we're supporting other cards, that we can also support other cards that also support Dragon's Rage Channeler, but also work with Mishra's Bauble and Urza's Bauble. And you can start to like build out interactions and gameplay around these cards that you really want to play, and that you want to be good cards. And there are cards that are printed every year that can really influence the way that we design our decks, and can even change the way that we design our decks from a single printing, because it can be inspirational to you. So Dan, also a lover of lands like myself, had the idea of the triomes, which I think are an excellent answer. Completing the triumph cycle is a huge deal for mana-based quality. These cards let you do many stupidly powerful things. I know lands are a boring choice, but these are fucked up lands. Lands are not a boring choice to me, as anybody who knows me would know. But also, like, completing, you know, it's worth it to examine the triomes again, given that we have all 10. I mean, yeah, I agree with you. Brandon. Brando or Brandon? Is it Brandon? I think it is, right? If you're not called, if you're Brando, but you're not Brandon, I'm at a loss here. Brandon, but whatever. Okay. Cool. Thank you. I'm also mad that they're not named. Okay. How are we doing? Are we fussy? We're fussy. Can I put you back up here? Igor? Be a good boy. Be a good boy. Good. So enamored by the computer. For years, he sat on my windowsill and never paid attention to it. Last week, notices the computer exists. Now all of a sudden, he can't look away from it. It's like I've opened up a new world for him. Look at him. He's like anxious now. It's okay. So like having the complete cycle is like a pretty big deal. Well, you know, it reinforces everything that the Triumph stood for at first. It's going to have it's going to continue to put a lot of pressure on everyone's mana base that is building a cube. Do you Triumph? Do you not Triumph? There's a lot of ink spilt as to whether or not these are cards that like everybody wants to play. I don't really care to like make those kinds of evaluations because I don't think they're worthwhile. I think like the question of like, should I play Triomes in my cube should come from like places about supporting multicolor and supporting cards that require land types. To a lesser degree cycling, but cycling isn't really something I'm thinking about with these cards as much as, say, you know, hieroglyphic illumination is. But I think now that we have 10, it's really important to like make the choice, and the choice of playing the Triumph should be informed by the cards you want to play in your cube. I think I want to play with the Triumphs is not as strong of a desire as I want to play with Niv-Mizzet Reborn. I think like I want to play with Omnath or Niv-Mizzet Reborn is like a very strong reason to want to play with these cards. But like playing with these cards and not playing multicolor cards in high density, or even 3-color cards in some amount of density, is just kind of like playing it for the sake of playing it. You can play a lot of other lands that come into play untapped that function very, very well, that you don't need these necessarily. So playing them is not without a cost. Obviously they can be fetched, whatever, but playing them ETB, they're still end of the battlefield tapped. You still need to understand like how you're using them, because they're going to signal something to the drafters. And if they're just, you know, treating them like they're Khans of Tarkir tri-lands is not giving them due credit. And I think that having the sense of like letting the drafters know what the implications of Triumphs are, like, hey, I'm playing these because I support X, Y, and Z, and like these open up the design space to allow me to play Niv-Mizzet Reborn. Great. That's a great foundation for wanting to play a lot of multicolor cards in your cube. But they should inform the drafter of what's going on, and you should use them to build and you should build an environment around them. Obviously, bringing this up after Leyline Binding is interesting, because we have a domain card and then cards that truly enable domain to happen. I mean, you've seen Modern and Legacy, like Triumphs and domain and Leyline Binding are in Modern, like that card is like, these things are very popular right now. People are playing blue-white control decks with Triumphs that are only partially blue and white so that they can cast their Leyline Bindings for 1 mana. That's a pretty extreme example. That's like a constructed leveled example. Nevertheless, the point kind of stands, right? So it's kind of like, it's not cheating to say Triomes because there are 5 other ones that exist already, but finishing it really puts the point. It kind of puts an endpoint to, like, when are we getting these? What's going to happen once we have all 10, etc., etc. Servok is a card Servok. This actually didn't look this up. So what do we got here? Really? A 4-mana 3/4 legendary creature. I'm beginning of each player's end step. If no permanents left the battlefield this turn, that player loses X life or X is Servok's power. So, if I don't remove a battle, if nobody removes a permanent from the battlefield at the end of any turn, whoever's player's turn it is, they lose 3 life. So, it just sucks people's life totals down, assuming that nothing changes, which is tough because the kind of cubes that I would see this playing in combat, creature combat's gonna be a big part of the experience. I wonder why they would suggest this card. I'd be interested in digging into a little more into it. So let's dig into this a little bit. Permanents leaving the battlefield being something that you want to control is not easy. And punishing people for, not being able to sacrifice or not being able to trade in combat is aggressive in some ways, because you you want to, like, hit them harder, basically. You want to, like, double Servok's power. But also, like, if you're being aggressive, your opponent's going to try to trade resources with you to deny Servok's power. But then you're relying on the power and toughness of the creature to really carry the rest of the weight of the card. So I'm not really sure what we're hoisting up about this card. Maybe I need to talk to them a little bit about this. I'm just curious what they think. I know that they have a really heavily curated top-down cube, the Fey cube. Switched over to Titan Hunter. I know Titan Hunter. I remember. I think this card is a lot more synergy. There's a lot more synergy baked into the card. Yeah, it's also got a really sweet weapon here. It's fucking sick. 5 mana 4/5. If no creatures died, it deals 4 damage to that player. And then you have a built-in sack. So this one's a lot easier to control. This also didn't come out in 2022, so it's kind of off the table for evaluation right now. I'm not sold on this. I'm gonna have to reach out to them and ask them what's shaking with this one. All right, so let's go to the next one. Steve, the Steven Music. I like that they answered me. I don't engage with Steve very much. Obscure cards and supplemental sets are always a favorite. So the 2 that were picked out were From the Catacombs and Currency Converter. So supplemental and commander cards are not off the table for me. So let's go into them a little bit. So From the Catacombs is a 5 mana sorcery. Returns a creature card from any graveyard to the battlefield with a corpse counter on it. If that creature would leave the battlefield, exile instead of putting it anywhere else. I guess the corpse counter is a way to remember that it has to have an exile clause. That is, I guess, the way that that's templated. You take the initiative. Okay, that's really powerful. So this is an example of an initiative card. And then it has escape as well. So you can exile 5 other cards from your graveyard to cast this from your graveyard again. So there's a lot going on here. I think it's... I know, baby. I know. Do you think maybe we can lay down in the bed? What do you think about that? You think we should lay down in the bed? Oh, baby? You're just bonding with me so much over the computer. Here, I'm gonna go put you down. Okay? Hold on, guys. I'll be right back. Lay down. Down. Lay down. It's okay. Just lay down. Lay down, Nico. Lay down. Good. Lay down. No. No. Why? Why must you? Why must you? You will not do it. Sit. Good. You won't do it. This is hilarious. You should see him right now. Hang on. Let me move the camera down so you can see. Igor. Okay. Here. Come here. Alright. Here you go. Alright, never mind. Okay. So, maybe if I did this. Maybe if I block out my face on here, he won't understand what's going on. Ah, yes. Okay. It's not going to work. Okay. So, get a reanimation spell with an exile clause and a counter to keep track. You've got initiative. So you got a base effect, which is 5 mana reanimate with an exile clause. You got the initiative, which is a mechanical design that we can, I guess, spend some time talking about. And then it has escape, which is revisiting a mechanic from a couple of years ago with Theros Beyond Death. No. No. Just say right there. So the most relevant part of this card, is the initiative. The initiative, like being a design choice that resembles Monarch, in that it is a multiplayer mechanic that we experience in 1v1 because most Magic is played 1v1 and has drastic effects on the game as a 1v1 mechanic. Monarch being the original implementation of this, and the new one being, I don't know if you think it's better or think it's worse. I'm not really here to like argue that, but the initiative definitely like had a huge impact on all of constructed Magic that it was legal in. I think. I don't think it's played in Vintage, but it's definitely played in Legacy and Pauper and Commander, obviously. And then, I tried playing it in my cube, and I got a pretty negative reaction from my player base, so I cut the card, which is White Plume Adventurer. I think there are initiative cards that are like we can hold up in 2022 as being strong contenders for like some of the most impactful cards. However, my pushback against initiative, I think, is it doesn't really you don't really need to build around initiative. It's just like tacked on value to a card. Um, it's not like venturing into the dungeon makes the initiative triggers better. It's pretty parasitic in that way, and its objective power level can be extremely high, um, especially once you get into just lower casting costs. Um, yeah, yes, it's super super powerful. Um, it is, I would say, actually, pretty emblematic of like tracking complexity, um, which is something that I think bleeds over from Daybound, like Day Night from last year, and this is something that Wizard of the Coast has taken as like a design choice, which is like global systems that are like adjacent to the game that are like require tracking, but with Daybound, Nightbound, or whatever, it wasn't always relevant to the game because you could have one day-night creature in your deck, and then it doesn't really, like, what do you do? How do you keep track of it afterward? You know, after the creature dies, if you ever cast a Reckless Stormseeker and then the Reckless Stormseeker dies, you have no way to reanimate it or whatever. Do you keep track of day-night? Like, you don't have to at that point. So what happens? It just kind of fades away, right? Whereas initiative is much more active, but it requires multiple pieces, game pieces. It requires, I think, 3 game pieces, which is like 2 Undercity cards and an initiative card. So there's like tracking, but it's an additional resource and something that you're both competing for. So it's kind of like this mini game. It's a huge redesign of the Monarch that is both more interesting and also like much more powerful. It's more complex. There's more choices involved in it, so it feels even more powerful in a way. I'd say there'd have to be some kind of initiative card on here on my list. This one in particular doesn't do it for me, but I think just having the initiative on the screen is like really important. However, my thing I will stress as I close out on initiative is like it doesn't actually do a lot to an environment to have initiative in it. It's very parasitic and like doesn't require much inherently to like make it better, or like doesn't change the way you might build your cube all that much. You know, a card with escape is much more texturally interesting to a cube than a card with initiative, in my opinion. However, on a raw power level, it's extremely high. So, yeah. The other one Steve gave is one of my cards I've experimented with quite a bit in 2022. So, I absolutely fucking love this card. This is Currency Converter. So it's a 1-man artifact. Really, really important. Whenever you discard a card, you may exile that card from your graveyard. And then you can loot for 2 tap, and then you can tap, put an exile card with Currency Converter into your graveyard. If it's a land, make a treasure. If it's a non-land, make a 2/2 rogue creature token. This is a card that has made me change my cube to make it better. This is a great example of a card that is just a card design that inspires a lot of like it makes certain cards that already are good better by its existence, and then also like you want to do you can play around with the things that it creates. You can lean into that more as opposed to just incidental value. We can look at some of the pieces that it's making, and my and before I start stumbling over my words even more, one of the things that I want to write about is game objects, because that's been a huge push from WotC, not just this year, but for the last couple of years, probably since food, really food and then treasure really push this idea of like artifact tokens and little game objects that like get a little bit of value, and slapping them on a bunch of different cards, and seeing the implications of it roll out across every Magic format. I can tell you right now that like 2021, my top thing that I said that happened in Magic was treasure tokens. I think it was like had a seismic ripple effect on the entire game. And I think like it's an opportunity, treasure tokens existing is an opportunity for all of us to like look at how we can play around and get a lot of like extra value off of these free or incidental treasure tokens. And it just so happens that since then we've gotten blood. We got a revisit of Clue. We got blood. More treasure, and now like I can't even say it, Power Stone tokens. So there's a lot of different artifact game objects that are being spat out by cards that have been printed over the last couple of years. But like this past year we saw a lot of different shit going on, and I think like embracing these as like engines is something that's like really interesting as it could open up a lot of design space for you in your cube. Having a card that can single-handedly generate creature tokens and treasure tokens is very powerful. Like, this card is not like cute. This card is powerful. But it's slow, especially for a high-powered cube. But it also has a really interesting line of text on the top, which says, whenever you discard, you may exile the card from your graveyard. So you can lean into discard effects. You can lean into creating incidental treasure tokens. There are ways of putting objects in the graveyard, by discarding them. So this card asks you to build around it to make it great, even though it is all kind of this neat little machine. If you really like this card, you can lean into every single thing that it does. It exiles cards out of your graveyard and turns them back into treasure and creature tokens. It loots. It can be tutored up with cards like Urza's Saga. Like, the tokens it generates can be sacrificed. They can be used to cast off-color spells. There's a lot going on with this card, and it can feel a little busy, or it can feel like it's just kind of this neat little value engine, but and it can be. I'm not saying that you have to look at things this way, but what I'm asking you is, when you look at this, are you using all the parts of the chicken? Are you using all the parts of the buffalo? Are you really are the card choices that you're making informed by this and making this card better, or is this card just kind of incidentally working? And I think if we let ourselves be informed by the cards that we want to, all the cards that we want to play, or maybe just the best cards, I don't know. I mean, a lot of Cube is, take the cards that you want to play and spider out from that, like build around those, which is kind of what I'm saying, but maybe I'm stressing like looking at each card again more, and then I'm stressing doing it with more cards. And as we get new cards, see how that changes, how maybe one card could change the way what you want to support, and it could change your decks, could change your archetypes, could add something to an environment. So yes, play Currency Converter. The card is great, but lean into Currency Converter because the card can be even more powerful at not that great of a cost, or at a cost, but a cost that you can roll out to other parts of your cube. I play Currency Converter and I play Faithless Looting. Well, maybe I should also play Careful Study and Chart a Course. Those cards are blue and red. So what else can I do by discarding cards, drawing extra cards, by turning cards into, treasure tokens, by turning cards into creatures? What kind of deck would want that? Is it reactive? Is it proactive? Am I tutoring this up? Am I, is this part of a little engine that I can create? Is it like a little more Johnny? What card choices can influence this? And then what are those cards that you build around this do to the rest of your environment? Ooh, well now I have these cards. Maybe we can play around with Careful Study and Faithless Looting a little bit more. Maybe there's something there. Maybe we can play, maybe we can support the graveyard a little bit more. Maybe there's other things we can do in that space, like, making these sort of cards like Faithless Looting, which is like a very underutilized cube card in my opinion, like really extract more worth out of a card like that, like so that it's becomes desirable to a lot more people, because there's a lot more going on with Faithless Looting. The cards like Currency Converter are supported because of cards like Faithless Looting, and the other way around. Somehow it's both ways. I don't know. I hope I'm not losing any of you, but in this monologue of mine, this is a way of thinking about card evaluation and cube construction that I'm wrestling with and I'm writing an article about. So you're hearing me kind of work this shit out live, and I hope it's interesting to you, as is interesting to me. Gut, True Soul Zealot. So let's pull up Gut, because I tweeted about this card after CubeCon. Namely because it blew my mind in CubeCon, and I really wanted to put it in my cube like right after CubeCon. This is really similar to what Currency Converter is, in that, yes, it does something pretty powerful on its surface. It, like, you can construct you can pretty easily look at this and construct some play patterns that are aggressive and powerful. However, you get, again, you can sacrifice cards with this. You can sacrifice artifacts. You can sacrifice creatures. They both turn into these 4/1 menace skeletons. Why they have menace, I really don't know. Choose a background is not relevant to me for the most part. If I ever start to dabble into Commander Cube, I will probably start talking about backgrounds. However, Oh, I think the implications of Gut being like a sacrifice outlet and a rabble master, something that's great on curve, um, but also great later, so long as you just have something to attack with. You're getting sacrifice triggers, you're getting aggressive creatures, you're getting game objects in the form of creature tokens. Um, there's a lot that's going on here incidentally. Um, Notably, it can't sacrifice itself, but whatever. You're getting a lot of like value at a low cost. Like it has a cost to it. You need to have a target and, that you can sacrifice something to. However, this is another example of, hey, this card is something that we can lean into to make it better. If we can find ways to create incidental artifact tokens and turn those tokens into 4/1s. We can kind of animate them, turn them into these skeleton creatures. We can support Gut. Yeah, I mean it's great. The cards that was what I misread about this card when I first read it, was that it triggers on an attack, not it attacking. I mean, if it said it attacking, the card would not be playable in my main cube, but now I'm playing it in my main cube. I love this card. Basically, like, yes, you look at it, you can evaluate it. Yes, it has a little setup. Yes, it's powerful. Yes, it's aggressive. Yes, it sacrifices. But, like, do we look at this in a vacuum? Do we look at this as being inherently powerful or needing a little bit of setup, and it slots perfectly into a red aggressive deck because you can upgrade your creatures? Or do we look at this as hey, I want to play with Gut, and it says I can sacrifice artifacts as well as creatures. So let's see what artifacts we can create, cast, and sacrifice. Do we sacrifice bridges? Do we sacrifice treasure tokens? Do we sacrifice blood? Do we sacrifice clues? Do we sacrifice baubles? Do we sacrifice whatever? Like, there's so many options. And those options, once you lay out all of your options, hey, this is the range. What are the things that I want we can play in here that look like they would work really well to press the max value of this card? And then in doing that, how does that impact the other aspects of my cube? What else goes on? What else wants these things to happen? So that we're maximizing the card at hand, but also letting that spread through the cube, so that it's not happening like it's not just one person that wants this stuff. So it's multiple people that want to engage with the gameplay in this way. Engaging with the cards that you want to be fun. Which ideally is all of them, but that's fucking hard, man. Is everybody like vibing with this? Like, I'm gonna take a little water break, but I just want to check in. I know I got a couple of y'all watching right now, and I just want to make sure that this is making sense to you. Like, am I going too deep? Like, am I over explaining myself, or is this good? Like, are we happy? Give me a second. I'm gonna get a drink of water. So you can think about this as like this framework is like a natural extension of the complexity of things like redundancy, right? So like, you know, a couple of years ago it was all about redundancy with me, like playing Fire Ambush and with your lightning strikes, right? Because the decks want the cards to be successful, to be competitive. And there was this idea of building decks based on the needs of the archetype and evaluating things based on rate according to what, you know, evaluating your needs based on rate, and the necessarily parasitic cards that go along with those archetypes, like burn spells for red. So this is kind of an extension of that in a way. It's like, man, this is something I need to maybe write down. You don't get to see this yet. This is for me. Like, so we're going from this kind of principle of redundancy of necessary effects to like the principle of effects, like of your decks are looking for cards as engines, and then cards to have engines, and then things that kind of you can be built around, or things that you can build around those engines, or that support them, or like make them consistent. So you're looking for like this grease and all of this these moving parts to ensure that your cards are being maximized, or that you can give your players the potential to maximize them, which is pretty spiky, I think, but also like pretty Johnny too. I guess maybe that's the kind of player I am. I'm not sure, but in that, and what I mean by that is like spiky stuff is like, spiky mechanics and stuff are like things where like connive is a great example of a spiky mechanic. Cycling is a spiky mechanic. Things that let you replace cards, like not get the intended value or perceived value of your card. It's like a spiky thing, and then like your Johnny thing is like your combo, or your like complex puzzle pieces coming together, executing something like that. Combination, as the kids call it. I don't know. Maybe it is. I guess I'm working through that. Okay, so yeah, so a couple more things I'll say about gut, and then we'll keep going. Hey now, Airborne Moxon says, I'm warping my cube's power level around it instead of cutting it, which means naturally that Eric is supporting the card and making card choices that inform the drafter that gut is good and playable, and instead of like accepting that it's too high power, or you know, that it he's kind of accepting that I think what I think is a smart choice, which is you're in letting your drafters know that this card is, you know, you're doing what you have to do to let drafters know that this card is good, and you can build around it, and it's not just, it might be slightly inherently powerful, but we're going to really let you kind of go off with this card. So now we get to. I'm sure this is the reason that David is watching this stream. Because he never comes on here ever. We get to talk about Kiki Jiki. The new Kiki Jiki, I should say, actually. Fable of the Mirror Breaker is, I think, a great example, but also a terrible example. And I mean that with the utmost respect for this card. This card is kind of like obnoxiously powerful. Sleeper card of the year? Interesting. Tell me why. I want to hear your thoughts on why. Because, it did come out. Yeah, just give me your story on that. I mean, far and away, this is the most powerful saga ever printed. So, like, it's... What? It seems like it took a while for keepers to latch onto it. It took me a little while. It took me a couple weeks before I bought it. It didn't take long, but it definitely took longer than I thought. I was way too fixated on 3 mana for a 2/2 as a starting rate. Way too fixated on it to really understand the card. The just raw power level of this card. I think, okay, so we have Saga, right? Sagas have been going since Dominaria, but this is the first time that we had MDFC sagas. So, like, we have this saga that transforms. And this is the most powerful implementation of this card. So it is an exemplary... It's a lot of things coming together, right? It's sagas, it's not MDFC, it's saga and transform mixed into one, and game objects, and discarding, and copying creatures. It is so many things, and all of them matter, like, so much that it's hard. The thing that I love about this card and hate about it is that it is like, it does all the things, but it also, like, just is so unbelievably powerful on its own that, like, it doesn't take a lot of deck building really to, like, maximize this card. And the gameplay isn't particularly interesting. It's just great. And it's pretty threatening on multiple levels. It's threatening. Each trigger on the saga is threatening, and the implication of your being able to, Kiki Jiki your creatures is horribly threatening. So, yeah. I think this is a card that you don't have to support at all. If you just want to play good cards, this card it's great. You're going to love it. And your players are going to be familiar with the experience because it's eternal. It's a modern playable card. It's a pioneer playable card. And they're going to... But they're also like... There's a lot going on here that you can also lean into. Similarly to Gut and Currency Converter. These are cards that, like, have things going on with them that can be maximized. Yeah, in Constructed you see people discard Kroxa to Fable the Mirror Breaker, and, like, that's kind of what MyCube does. That's the gameplay of MyCube. And, like, there's so much more that can be done with your Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and how you use the treasure, and how you use the goblin token, and what you copy. The issue that comes along with, on the same hand, the Fable of the Mirror Breaker, is that a lot of that incidental synergy or things that you can lean harder into get lost because the card doesn't need any of it. It can just function perfectly fine as is. And like that's I'm not saying it's a shame because it's not a shame. It's just this is how the card functions. And like the power level is going to dictate the gameplay more than how you can maximize the card. The card doesn't need maximization, or it's not hard to make it to like peak to like max the power level of this card. So it's not really that interesting of a card. It's just very powerful. Yes, it does have the blueprint for ways to build your cube or like make your cube more leaning into it or supporting it, but doesn't need any of that. So you kind of it falls for itself in that way. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not shit talking the card. I love this card. I love it. I fucking bought, Goblin Shaman tokens because I love this card so much, which is just a dumb. It's a small purchase, but it's a dumb fucking purchase, So, those are some of the responses I got. Let me check Discord real quick and see before I talk about mine. Yeah, I mean, well, people said Gut and Fable the Mirror Breaker, which is funny. Yeah, I mean, it was just Gut and Fable, which like Gut does a lot more for me than Fable does at this point, but like, I can't diss Fable the Mirror Breaker. The card's fucking awesome. But like, you don't need to maximize this card. And it's not hard to, given what we have available to us in 2022. So I guess it's time I can just talk about mine. So I have a couple right now. I'll start with my first one. So I'm going through the year and I'm kind of talking about these cards as they come to me. As I write about, a little bit about the sets and constructing my arguments here. This is my first pick here for mechanical design in 2022. Like, this is using my framework I'm working on right now. This is what I'm talking about. This is the first card I want to talk about. I'm gonna talk about two cards today, and then I'm gonna kind of finish it and let this sit, and then I'll continue working on it later. Hello, Igor. Some water. So Igor obviously notices this is a dog. Okay, so why did I choose this card? Pretty innocuous, right? 2 mana, 1/1 shaman creature, ETB draw card. I chose this card for a couple of reasons that I think are really important. And they're important because they're important to where we are with Magic design, with Magic card design. And, it has to do with white. White and card draw. This card is the culmination of years of discussion about white's role in the color pie, the way that it gets card advantage. How do we give white card advantage? How do we justify white drawing cards? How do we let them care about other things than the things that they've told us white should be caring about for years? And this has implications in Commander and implications in Constructed too. like regular constructed formats. Come here. Spirited Companion is finally seeing what they decided on at WotC for drawing cards and white creatures, like a cantripping white creature. Like, yes, we had Wall of Omens fucking 10 years ago as a color shifted version of Wall of Blossoms, but that isn't really in the color pie. It's not really like, it didn't really like get any traction as a design either. It just kind of happened, and then people blinked it with Resto and Flicker Wisp, and that was kind of just like a thing that happened, right? But now we have Spirited Companion. They've decided that small white creatures can draw cards. That it is the best at this thing. Or it is primary in this thing. And, wow, this card took a long time to make. And it's simple. It's elegant. It's familiar. We know this card. This card's Elvish Visionary. However, what do we have on this too? It's an enchantment creature. I know, baby. I know. You see the doggy? He's smelling the screen now. It's an enchantment creature. It kind of this adds a texture to the card that further justifies its function. So they're using the mechanic of, or the I don't know if you call this a mechanic, but like the design of the card being both an enchantment, like two different card types. And as we'll see in 2022, there's a lot of exploration into super types or super card types mattering, like artifacts matter, enchantments matter, lands matter. In addition to the familiar, like spells matter, creatures matter. I mean, creatures matter is also a thing with Alliance. So there's a lot of that happening at Wizards right now. There's a lot of cards that are printed that care about that kind of, the cards being two different card types, or cards caring about like what card type they are. And Spirited Companion cares about being, it matters that this is an enchantment. This is not an incidental thing. And it's why it is what it is. It's why it's a 2-mana 1/1 that draws a card. If it was a 2-mana 1/1 that drew a card that was just creature dog, it wouldn't I'm not saying it wouldn't work. They could probably print it, but like I don't think that as it stands with white that we're going to get cards like this, just as 2-mana 1/1 ETB draw card. And I'll probably be wrong. They'll probably fucking print it next year or something. But like, this card cares about its types. And they finally printed a card a card like this, and it took a long time. This is a very exemplary design for me in 2022. Like when I think of cards, like so let's zoom out a little bit. When I think of what they're working on over there at WotC, what they're printing, and then what sort of exploration are they doing this year that's applicable to us as cube designers, as a community, right? We have white getting cantripping creatures. We have cards caring about their types. We have the elegance of this little guy, this beautiful little dog. That's less relevant, but I can't. It goes without saying, given my little homie here. Sit down, Igor. Good boy. Yeah, Spirited Companion does a lot of, means a lot. And as cube designers, as we are beholden to Wizards of the Coast for all of our game pieces. We don't make the shit, we just use it. They make it. It's our job to take this information and do something with it. And Spirited Companion represents so much of what they're giving us this year. So it's not just about the card. It's about, what does this card represent for us? What is this card? What can we do with this? And fucking Spirited Companion, man. All right, we're gonna show you one more. But Igor's, he's looking at the dog, so let's change the dog. I'm sure you were expecting this one because Third Path Iconoclast. This is my other card we're going to talk about, and then we're going to end this discussion for now because I need to, I need to write about this shit, man. It's not just going to be a bunch of podcasts or Twitch streams or whatever. I love cards like this that come along and support multiple archetypes. Yes, it supports multiple archetypes, multiple decks, tons of different cubes. It is... Spirited Companion is doing so much heavy lifting for us. And it is, in of itself, a great design. And is also, like, something that we can grab onto. That we can, like, say, hey, Wizards is doing this, like, Wizards is giving us this kind of stuff and we're going to play around with it. And just slots into pretty much any white deck. Yeah, it does. It does. But again, I'm going to say this a lot. Let's use the whole Buffalo if we can. It's harder with a card like that because because card types mattering is like something I'm going to be writing about, but isn't like an easy thing to exploit or maximize, especially when there's multiples. Like Kamigawa, incredible set. Caring about enchantments and artifacts together, horribly difficult to execute. Did it masterfully. Sit down. Sit down. Be a good boy. Be a good boy. Come here. It's really hot in here. Lay in your bed. Get in your bed. Get in your bed. Hydrate. Yes. Thank you. All right. Igor is scratching at the door. I don't know how distracting this is going to be, but I'll find out. Hold on. Fighting. Alright, I'm gonna get some water. Alright, I put him to bed. And I think it worked. So, God, he is so distracting. I love that thing to death, but he's so fucking distracting. Alright. So, third pack Iconoclast. We'll talk about this. And then, since we're almost at 2 hours, what I'll do is I'll go over my current cube a little bit. I'll post the link. And then we'll talk about where I see it going right now. And I'll do design space exploration later, because apparently this topic about that I apparently have a lot more to say about this than I thought I did. So that's good, I think. Okay, so third path Iconoclast. I saw some people talking about this in the KubeCon Discord, and I wrote something that I guess I'm happy with it, but it's kind of the inspiration point for, you know, where I want this, or like what I wanted out of this article. Also, I've been kind of itching to write an article since Dominaria United, so this will be good. So for me, this card, brand new card, does all of the things that, like, does a lot of the things that my cube cares about. And it also does a lot of things that, like, Magic, like, that Wizards wants me to care about, I think. Which is, it's cheap, so it's efficient. It's multicolor in that, you know, where we have a increased support for domain, better mana fixing through triomes. There's like a stronger desire to play gold cards or support gold in a cube. It cares about spells, cheap spells, anything non-creature, little artifacts, you know, baubles, something I bring up a lot. Filling up, casting spells means filling up your graveyard with different card types. So you're bolstering Delve, Escape, Delirium, Flashback, Unearth, and that's all great. That's stuff that we expect from our Pyromancer style creatures. It's something I, you know, really loved about Sprite Dragon as a design in 2020. However, the big thing that matters here for me is we now have artifact creature tokens. So we have artifact tokens as a design exploration from Wizards in the last couple of years. We have creature tokens as a Pyromancer, historically, like a historical Pyromancer, very familiar play pattern with things like Monastery Mentor, Sedgemoor Witch, Young Pyromancer, etc. And now we have this combination of the two. So we're creating creature tokens and we're creating artifacts while we're building up, you know, while we're getting value off of casting any non-creature spell. There's so much inherent synergy in this card that to call it a Pyromancer is like kind of insulting, because it just surmises that we just have another copy of this card that was printed in M14, which was almost 10 years ago. Like, this card asks us to, or suggests to us, a lot of things about the way we design our, maybe the way we even build our decks for our cubes. Like, we have a repeatable artifact token generator. We have ways to fill the graveyard, a reason to fill the graveyard, a reason to cast spells. What are we doing to further support all of this? What are we not playing that we could use to support this card, to make this card better? And then what are the repercussions of supporting this card better? What else can we draw from that this card suggests we do with our cards? The potential from this card is so rich and deep, but the card is so elegant. It's so simple. And it also cares about cards having multiple card types. Like, this is a lot of what 2022 is for me, and it's a lot of what modern Magic is for me. And it is executed in such a beautiful way. Like, use cards like this to open up design space for yourself. Where do we look to increase the overall power level of this card? And when we look there, what other cards can feed off of that same space? Now we're building something. Now we're building, synergy that exists between cards that are arguably just powerful inherently, but also can further exploit every aspect of. Maybe this leads you into a tokens direction. Maybe it leads you into an artifact direction. Maybe it leads you into a graveyard direction. Maybe it leads you into a spells direction. And then what do we do about all of that? What cards can we play? I mention baubles all the fucking time because they're like the perfect enabler for cards like this. Yeah, I mean, I'm getting tired, so I don't really want to just keep spewing the same shit over and over again. So I hope I've been somewhat clear about some of this, but I'm working on what exactly I mean when I talk about the implications and the design space that's available to us with cards like this, and what we should look for, what we could look for, how we could look at cards that are printed each year or through the years that either best represent these ideas that WotC's playing with, or that feed into similar, like, kind of same space that suggests different kinds of decks or archetypes to exist, or just pile of engine pieces and synergistic game pieces. Yeah. Card's fucking great, right? It's fucking awesome. I can't wait to own one. It's in my cart right now. I should probably check my prices and pre-order that shit. All right. So, with that out of the way, let's talk about my nascent cube design project, which I haven't worked on in maybe a week. Work has been really all-consuming, so it's been hard to find enough time. When did I last work on this? A week ago. Okay. So, this isn't anywhere near fucking complete at all. This is so preliminary. And I think, given that I have off most of next week, like the week leading up to Thanksgiving, It's possible I might do a couple streams. Depends on how the kind of flow of my week goes. So what is this cube? What's going on here? So the idea is to build an artifact cube, and I think I said something about this on Twitter, where I said like that's it. I'm building an artifact cube, and this was with the Brothers War spoiler, I think, going out. So you're probably thinking to yourself, who gives a shit, Derek? It's an artifact cube. Lots of people build artifact cubes. What's going on with this one? Why should I care about you building an artifact cube? It's not like you're doing something new. I'm probably not, but what I want to kind of talk through here with you is the power level because of intended gameplay and what I'm looking at for support and like how I'm looking to support the idea, and then how I flush out design space. So it's a little bit of a explaining a learned practice for me to all of you. So my intention is to build a cube. What if I could build an artifact cube where every deck cared about artifacts, and every deck used artifacts differently, to different ends, but used artifacts as a means to the end, and the power band is low. So we're playing kind of I wouldn't say janky cube, but like a low power cube. But like all of the decks care about artifacts. And what would something like that look like? And could it be supported in the way that I would need it to be? Like, in other words, could I actually flush out archetypes? Could the gameplay be good? I don't know. So what do? I say, okay, I have the idea. I want to do a low power artifact cube. Where it's like every deck cares about artifacts. So how do we start with that? Well, let's look at the sets that have been printed that care about artifacts. And let's see what kinds of artifacts or artifact generation we can look at that would fill up the void of needing artifacts in every single deck. Because it can't just be, I could just fill it up with a bunch of fucking artifacts, but like, and that's cool, but then you just have like an artifact cube. And then eventually you have like no green, which is like kind of what happened with David McDarby's cube. Because at a certain point it's like, well, I'm not really sure it's worth it to try to flesh out another color. So what do? Well, we're exploring design space. And by that I mean like we're doing a lot of fucking Scryfall searches. And we're gonna scrape not every set, but I'm going through a lot of the main sets right now that have cared about artifacts. Brothers War, Kamigawa, Kaladesh, stuff like that. Modern Horizons 2. Yeah, I mean, Brothers War was the inspiring, like it totally inspired me to do this. And so what I like to do is I like to gather all my space. Yes, I'm going to include 40k cards. This was taught to me by a friend. Just spend a lot of time like building up the space, like explore it by like, you don't delete anything necessarily. You're just adding and adding and adding cards that touch the central idea. Like, does this all kind of like spin off of the main concept here? If low power cares about artifacts is the kind of the core ideas. Everything kind of has to touch that idea in some way. So I'm trying to find all the space that exists around the core idea and where the farthest reaches are, because I kind of know where the middle is, and then just see what happens. It takes hours and days to do this, but it's kind of my process right now, and we're gonna look it up. Like once it's done, then you start cutting it down, based on what you think the average power level is, what the top of the heap is, and then we start playtesting it. Building cubes is one of the best parts of Cube. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people that build cubes for a living, but they don't ever play them, which is totally cool. It's a choice you can make. I just think it's less fun. I think playing the cube and iterating is like one of the coolest parts of Cube as well. Finding out what works and what doesn't, because so much of what's going on is like what happens when 8 different people engage with it, you know? Good for you. I never did spreadsheet cubing, man. I kind of I came to cube design and already had things like Cube Tutor available to me. So I just did that. I don't have any nostalgia for that stuff. And 6-packs sound great. Anyway, this is the cube. It's called Artifactual Spectacularum. And that's a placeholder name, much like 4 Packs of Magic was a placeholder name. And then I never wanted it to be the name, but it just ended up being the name over time. It's kind of funny that way, how things work when you forget about things. So, I'm going to sign off there, actually. Hey, thanks for the follow. I'm going to sign off here just because it's getting late for this old man over here, and I got to go to bed. I hope this was enjoyable to you. I hope you learned something or have an idea or even just disagree with me about something. I'd love to hear it. I'm going to put this VOD up on YouTube in the morning, and going to continue writing about this and continue working on this idea of like this framework for thinking about cards, because I want a way to look at cards that is meaningful to more people in the community. I think we have a great group of people that all make cubes, and I want to, find ways to... I'm not saying we need to all speak the same language, because when we have 14 competing standards, you know what happens. We should have one that unifies them all. And then we have 15 competing standards. All right. Thanks for hanging out, Brandon. I really appreciate it. I'll be on next Tuesday at the minimum. Probably one more. As I want to talk about this stuff more. About the Artifact Cube, and then about my 2022 stuff. I got a long week of work ahead of me again, and then I'm off Sunday through Thursday. So let's see what we can do until my next stream. All right, man. And everybody,